My name is Isabella Rossi, and for 32 years, Florence has been the only world I've ever known. I breathe the scent of its leather workshops and sun-baked stone, taste the richness of its Chianti, and feel the pulse of its ancient heart beneath my feet. I'm a taxi driver, which might seem ordinary, but in Florence, it's a tapestry woven with stories. Every cobblestone holds a memory, every bridge whispers secrets, and my taxi, a humble Fiat, is a confessional on wheels. I ferried tourists giddy with romance, artists brimming with inspiration, and locals grumbling about the rising cost of espresso. I've heard confessions of love, secrets of betrayal, and the mundane anxieties of daily life. I wasn't born into a wealthy Florentine family with generations of art or winemaking behind them. My parents owned a small trattoria just outside the city center. I spent my childhood surrounded by the aroma of simmering tomatoes and the boisterous laughter of customers. They instilled in me a strong work ethic and an even stronger love for this city. After they passed away, I sold the trattoria and used the money to buy my taxi license. It was a way to stay connected to Florence, to be a part of its ever-flowing current. My life was simple, perhaps even predictable, but I found contentment in it. Until I met Marco. He was everything I wasn't: sophisticated, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He worked as a manager at a high-end fashion boutique on Via Tornabuoni, a world away from my humble Fiat. Our paths crossed one rainy evening when he hailed my taxi. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself captivated by his charm and his dreams of opening his own design studio. He was so different from the men I usually met, who were usually rough around the edges and smelling of motor oil and cigarettes. Marco, on the other hand, smelled of expensive cologne and had a way of making me feel like the most important woman in the world when he looked at me. He told me about his passion for fashion, his dreams of designing clothes that would be worn by celebrities and displayed in museums. I was drawn to his ambition, his drive, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his work. We started dating, and soon, my life revolved around him. I loved hearing about his day at the boutique, his interactions with famous designers, and his plans for the future. He took me to fancy restaurants, introduced me to his friends, and made me feel like I was finally part of something bigger than myself. We got married a year later, in a small ceremony at the Palazzo Vecchio. I wore a simple white dress, and Marco looked dashing in a tailored suit. As we exchanged vows, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I truly believed that we would spend the rest of our lives together, building a beautiful future filled with love, laughter, and success. I knew that Marco came from a privileged background, and I often felt insecure about my own humble beginnings. But he always reassured me that he loved me for who I was, not for what I had. He said that my kindness, my warmth, and my down-to-earth nature were what he admired most about me. For a while, I was happy. Blissfully, naively happy. I worked hard, driving long hours to support Marco's dreams. I wanted him to succeed, to achieve everything he had ever hoped for. I believed in him, and I was willing to do whatever it took to help him reach his goals. But slowly, imperceptibly, things began to change. Marco started working longer hours, coming home late at night, often smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. He became distant, less affectionate, and increasingly preoccupied with his phone. He stopped talking about his dreams, and when I asked him about his day, he would give vague, dismissive answers. He seemed to be pulling away from me, creating a wall between us that I couldn't penetrate. At first, I dismissed it as stress from work. The fashion industry was demanding, I knew, and Marco was under a lot of pressure. But as the weeks turned into months, my unease grew. I started to suspect that something was terribly wrong. I tried to talk to Marco about it, but he would brush me off, accusing me of being jealous and insecure. He said that I was imagining things, that he was simply focused on his career. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying to me, hiding something from me. One Tuesday morning, a day that would forever be etched in my memory, I decided to surprise Marco at work. I packed him his favorite panini and a thermos of strong espresso, hoping to bring a smile to his face and maybe even break through the wall that had grown between us. I drove to Via Tornabuoni and parked my taxi a few blocks away from the boutique. As I walked towards the entrance, I saw Marco through the large display window. He was standing close to a woman, a stunning blonde with piercing blue eyes and an air of effortless elegance. I recognized her immediately. It was Sofia Bellini, the boutique's owner and a prominent figure in the Florentine fashion scene. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. Marco and Sophia were laughing, their heads closed together. And then I saw it. He leaned in and kissed her, a lingering, passionate kiss that left no room for doubt. My world shattered. The panini and the espresso slipped from my hands, crashing to the ground. The sound seemed deafening in the bustling street. I stood there, frozen, watching them through the window, feeling a pain so intense that it took my breath away. The man I loved, the man I had devoted my life to, was betraying me with another woman, right in front of my eyes. I wanted to scream, to run inside and confront them, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by shock and disbelief. After what felt like an eternity, Marco and Sophia finally separated. They walked towards the back of the boutique, disappearing from my view. I turned and fled, tears streaming down my face. I ran blindly through the streets of Florence, my heart aching with betrayal and despair. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from the boutique, from Marco, from the life I had built with him. I ended up at the Ponte Vecchio, the oldest bridge in Florence, its shops shimmering with gold and jewels. I leaned against the stone railing, watching the Arno River flow beneath me, feeling numb and empty. The weight of Marco's betrayal pressed down on me, crushing me beneath its force. I had given him everything, sacrificed everything for him, and he had repaid me with lies and deceit. I had been so blind, so naive, so trusting. How could I have been so wrong about him? I stayed there for hours, lost in my thoughts, trying to make sense of what had happened. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, a sense of resolve began to emerge within me. I couldn't stay stuck in this pain, this despair. I had to do something, anything, to reclaim my life and my dignity. I wouldn't let Marco's betrayal define me. I would find a way to move on, to heal, and to come out stronger on the other side. But first, I needed answers. I needed to know why he had done this to me, why he had thrown away our marriage for another woman. And then, I would decide what to do next. As I walked back to my taxi, I made a silent promise to myself. Marco would not get away with this. He would pay for the pain he had caused me, for the trust he had broken. I didn't know how or when, but I would make sure of it. This was just the beginning. My life had been turned upside down, but I was determined to rebuild it, brick by brick, stronger and more resilient than before. The thought of facing Marco, of confronting him with his betrayal, filled me with dread. But I knew I couldn't avoid it. I had to hear his explanation to understand why he had done what he did. And then I would make my decision. I drove back to our apartment, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I parked the taxi and took a deep breath, trying to steel myself for the confrontation that awaited me. As I unlocked the door, I could hear Marco's voice inside. He was talking on the phone, his tone hushed and secretive. I know, he was saying. It's just a matter of time. I'll tell her soon, I promise. I burst into the apartment, my eyes blazing with anger. Marco jumped, startled, and quickly hung up the phone. He turned to me, his face pale and drawn. Isabella, he said, his voice trembling. What are you doing here? The stage was set for a confrontation, and I was ready to unleash my fury. I didn't waste any time. Who were you talking to? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Marco hesitated, avoiding my gaze. It was nothing, he mumbled. Just a friend. Don't lie to me, I snapped. I know everything. I saw you with Sophia Bellini. His face crumpled and he sank into a chair, defeated. Isabella, How could you? I interrupted, tears welling up in my eyes. How could you do this to me, to us? He looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt and regret. I'm so sorry, he said. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I retorted. You shattered my heart, you destroyed our marriage. How can I ever forgive you? He stood up and walked towards me, reaching out to touch my arm. Please, Isabella, let me explain. I recoiled, flinching away from his touch. I don't want to hear your excuses, I said. I just want you to leave, get out of my life. But where will I go? He asked, his voice pleading. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. Just go, and don't ever contact me again. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving me alone with my pain and my anger. As the door slammed shut behind him, I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My world had crumbled around me, and I felt lost and alone. I spent the next few days and a days, barely eating or sleeping. I replayed the scene in the boutique over and over in my mind, torturing myself with the image of Marco kissing Sophia. I couldn't understand how he could have betrayed me so easily, how he could have thrown away our love for someone else. I knew I had to do something to move on, to reclaim my life, but I didn't know where to start. My friends tried to comfort me, but their words felt hollow and meaningless. They told me that I deserved better, that Marco wasn't worth my tears. But their platitudes did little to ease the pain in my heart. One evening, as I was aimlessly scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post about a support group for women who had been betrayed by their partners. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to join. I figured I had nothing to lose. The support group met weekly at a community center in the Oltrarno neighborhood. I was nervous at first, but as I listened to the other women share their stories, I began to feel less alone. They understood what I was going through, the pain, the anger, the confusion. They had all been betrayed, and they had all found the strength to move on. The women in the group became my lifeline. They offered me advice, support, and encouragement. They helped me to see that I wasn't to blame for Marco's actions, that I deserved to be loved and respected. They also helped me to realize that I had the power to take control of my life and to create a new future for myself. As I began to heal, I started to think about revenge. I knew it wasn't the most mature or healthy response, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Marco needed to pay for what he had done to me. He had caused me so much pain, and I wanted him to experience the same pain that I had felt. At first, my thoughts were vague and unfocused. I imagined confronting him in public, exposing his affair to his friends and colleagues. I fantasized about ruining his career, sabotaging his relationship with Sophia. But as I spent more time thinking about it, my ideas became more elaborate, more devious. I realized that I didn't want to simply hurt Marco. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to take away everything that he valued, to leave him with nothing. I knew it was wrong, that revenge wouldn't bring me happiness or closure. But I couldn't help myself. I was consumed by a burning desire to make Marco suffer. One of the women in the support group, a wise and experienced woman named Alina, noticed the change in me. She saw the anger in my eyes, the bitterness in my voice. One day, after a meeting, she pulled me aside and said, "Isabella, I know you're hurting and I understand your desire for revenge, but I want you to be careful. Revenge can be a dangerous path. It can consume you, turn you into someone you don't want to be." I scoffed. "What else am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Just let him get away with it." "No," Alina replied, "but don't let your anger control you. Think carefully about what you want, and then find a way to achieve it without sacrificing your own happiness and well-being." Her words gave me pause. I knew she was right. Revenge wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't bring Marco back, and it wouldn't erase the pain he had caused me. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that he deserved to be punished. I decided to take Alina's advice and think carefully about what I wanted. I realized that I didn't want to simply hurt Marco. I wanted to expose him for who he really was, a liar, a cheater, and a user. I wanted to reveal his true character to the world, so that no one else would ever fall victim to his charm and manipulation. But how could I do that? I didn't have any proof of his affair, and I didn't have any power or influence. I was just a taxi driver, a woman who had been betrayed by her husband. How could I possibly take on someone like Marco, who was wealthy, successful, and well-connected? As I pondered my options, I remembered something Marco had once told me about his boss, Sophia Bellini. He had said that she was ruthless and ambitious, and that she would do anything to get what she wanted. He had also mentioned that she was secretly involved in some shady business dealings, using the boutique as a front for money laundering. I had dismissed it as gossip at the time, but now it gave me an idea. What if I could expose Sophia's illegal activities and bring her down? That would not only hurt Marco, but it would also protect other people from her greed and corruption. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way I could see to achieve my goals without sacrificing my own integrity. I decided to do some research to see if I could find any evidence to support Marco's claims about Sophia. I started spending my evenings at the library, poring over financial records and legal documents. I also started talking to people who knew Sophia, trying to gather information about her business dealings. It was slow and tedious work, but I was determined to uncover the truth. As I dug deeper, I started to find inconsistencies in Sophia's financial reports. There were large sums of money that couldn't be accounted for, and there were several suspicious transactions involving shell corporations in tax havens. I also discovered that Sophia had a history of shady dealings, including allegations of fraud and embezzlement. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that Marco's claims were true. Sophia Bellini was a criminal, and I was going to expose her. I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed help from someone who had experience investigating financial crimes. I thought about going to the police, but I didn't trust them. Sophia had connections in high places, and I feared that she would be able to quash any investigation. Then, I remembered a friend of my father's, a retired investigative journalist named Giovanni. He had a reputation for being fearless and incorruptible, and he had a long track record of exposing corruption and wrongdoing. I decided to reach out to him to see if he would be willing to help me. I called Giovanni and told him my story, explaining what I had discovered about Sophia. He listened patiently without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Isabella, this is a dangerous game you're playing. Sophia Bellini is a powerful woman and she won't hesitate to retaliate if you threaten her." "I know," I replied, "but I'm not afraid. I'm determined to bring her to justice." Giovanni paused for a moment, then said, "All right, I'll help you, but you have to promise me that you'll be careful. This could get ugly." I agreed, and we set up a meeting to discuss my findings in more detail. As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was finally taking action, and I was one step closer to exposing Marco and Sophia for who they really were. But I also knew that I was entering a dangerous world, a world of corruption, greed, and violence. I had no idea what awaited me, but I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. My quest for revenge had begun, and I wouldn't rest until justice was served. Little did I know that my actions would set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences, not only for Marco and Sophia, but for myself as well. Giovanni was a gruff, no-nonsense man in his late 60s, with a face etched with the stories he'd chased throughout his career. He met me at a small cafe near the Pont Santa Trinita, his eyes sharp and assessing as he listened to my story. I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, the inconsistencies in Sophia's financial records, the suspicious transactions, and the rumors of her shady dealings. Giovanni listened intently, occasionally asking questions and scribbling notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and took a long sip of his espresso. "This is good," he said, "but it's not enough. We need concrete proof, something that will stand up in court." I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I had hoped that what I had was enough to get the ball rolling, but Giovanni was right. We needed something more substantial. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "We need a mole," Giovanni said. "Someone on the inside who can provide us with irrefutable evidence of Sophia's illegal activities." I thought about it for a moment. The only person I knew who had access to Sophia's inner circle was Marco. But after what he had done to me, I couldn't imagine asking him for help. "I don't know anyone who would be willing to risk their neck for me," I said. Giovanni looked at me thoughtfully. "What about Marco?" he asked. "He used to work for Sophia, didn't he? Maybe he knows something that could help us." I hesitated. "I don't think so," I said. "He's completely under her spell. Besides, he hates me." "Hate can be a powerful motivator," Giovanni replied. "Maybe he's having second thoughts about his relationship with Sophia. Maybe he's starting to see her for who she really is." I considered Giovanni's words. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. If I could convince Marco to help me, we might be able to bring Sophia down once and for all. I decided to swallow my pride and reach out to him. I called him that evening, my heart pounding in my chest. He answered on the third ring, his voice hesitant and wary. "Isabella," he said, "what do you want?" "I need your help," I said. There was a long pause. "Help after what I did to you?" "Yes, help," I replied. "It's about Sophia." He was silent for a moment, then said, "What about her?" "I know what she's been up to," I said. "I know about her illegal activities, and I'm going to expose her." He gasped. "You can't do that," he said. "She'll destroy you." "I don't care," I replied. "I'm not afraid of her, but I need your help to get the evidence I need to bring her down." He hesitated again, then said, "What do you want me to do?" I explained my plan to him, telling him that I needed him to be a mole, to gather information about Sophia's illegal activities and provide it to me. He was reluctant at first, but after I appealed to his sense of guilt and his desire to make amends for what he had done to me, he finally agreed. "I'll do it," he said, "but you have to promise me that you won't get hurt." "I can't promise you that," I replied, "but I'll do my best." We arranged to meet the next day to discuss the details of our plan. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. I had managed to enlist Marco's help, but I knew that I was walking a dangerous path. Sophia Bellini was not someone to be trifled with, and I was putting myself, and Marco, in grave danger. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of secret meetings, clandestine phone calls, and whispered conversations. Marco provided me with a wealth of information about Sophia's illegal activities, including details about her money laundering operation, her tax evasion schemes, and her connections to organized crime. He also gave me copies of confidential documents, emails, and financial records that proved her guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. Giovanni helped me to analyze the information and to prepare a comprehensive report that could be presented to the authorities. We worked tirelessly, day and night, driven by a shared sense of purpose and a burning desire to bring Sophia to justice. As we got closer to our goal, I started to feel a sense of closure, a sense that I was finally taking control of my life and reclaiming my dignity. But I also knew that the most dangerous part of our plan was yet to come. We needed to find a way to present our evidence to the authorities without alerting Sophia and giving her a chance to cover her tracks or retaliate against us. Giovanni had a contact at the Guardia di Finanza, the Italian financial police, a respected officer named Inspector Rossi, no relation. We arranged to meet with him in secret to present our evidence. Inspector Rossi listened intently as we laid out our case, his eyes widening as he examined the documents Marco had provided. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "This is explosive. If what you're saying is true, Sophia Bellini is in serious trouble." "It's true," I replied. "We have the evidence to prove it." Inspector Rossi nodded. "I'll launch a full investigation," he said, "but I need you to be prepared to testify in court. Sophia Bellini will fight this tooth and nail, and she'll try to discredit you any way she can." "I'm ready," I said. "I'm not afraid of her." Inspector Rossi smiled. "Good," he said, "because you're going to need all the courage you can muster." The investigation was launched the next day, and within hours, Sophia Bellini's world began to crumble around her. Her boutique was raided by the Guardia di Finanza, and her assets were frozen. She was arrested and charged with money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The news of her arrest sent shockwaves through the Florentine fashion scene. No one could believe that the glamorous and successful Sophia Bellini was a criminal. As the investigation unfolded, Marco was called in for questioning. He testified against Sophia, providing the authorities with even more evidence of her illegal activities. He also admitted to his role in helping her to cover up her crimes, but he was granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. As for me, I became a local hero. The media hailed me as a courageous whistleblower who had risked everything to expose corruption and bring a criminal to justice. I was interviewed on television, featured in newspapers, and celebrated by the people of Florence. But amidst all the accolades and attention, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. I had achieved my goal of bringing Sophia Bellini to justice, but I hadn't found the peace and closure that I had been seeking. I still felt the pain of Marco's betrayal, and I still struggled to trust anyone. One evening, as I was sitting alone in my apartment, I received a phone call from Marco. "Isabella," he said, his voice subdued, "I need to see you." I hesitated for a moment, then agreed to meet him at a small park near the Arno River. When I arrived, I found him sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. He looked Chinese letter, and defeated. "Isabella, I'm so sorry," he said. "I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I truly regret what I did. I was blinded by ambition and greed, and I made a terrible mistake." I looked at him, my heart softening. I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. "I know," I said. "I forgive you, Marco." He looked up, his eyes filled with tears. "Really?" he said. "Yes," I replied. "But that doesn't mean we can be together again. I need to move on to find someone who will love and respect me for who I am." He nodded. "I understand," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the Arno River flow by. Then Marco stood up and said, "I should go." "Goodbye, Marco," I said. "Goodbye, Isabella," he replied. As he walked away, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had finally closed the door on my past, and I was ready to embrace my future. But the story doesn't end there. Just when I thought I could finally put the whole sordid affair behind me, I received a cryptic message that hinted at a deeper conspiracy, one that involved not just Sophia Bellini, but powerful figures within the Florentine government. The cryptic message arrived via an anonymous email, the subject line simply reading, "Follow the money." Inside was a single document, a complex flowchart outlining a network of offshore accounts and shell corporations, all ultimately leading back to a prominent member of the Florentine City Council, Councillor Alessandro Morti. Morti was a charismatic and influential politician, a champion of local businesses, and a vocal advocate for preserving Florence's cultural heritage. He was also, according to the document, deeply enmeshed in Sofia Bellini's money laundering scheme, using his position to protect her from scrutiny and to facilitate her illegal activities. I was stunned. I had thought that we had uncovered the full extent of Sofia's corruption, but it seemed that we had only scratched the surface. The revelation that Morty was involved changed everything. It meant that the corruption ran deeper than we had imagined, and that powerful forces were working to protect it. I showed the document to Giovanni, who was equally shocked. "This is huge," he said. "If this is true, it could bring down the entire city government." "But is it true?" I asked. "We need to verify this information before we can take it to the authorities." Giovanni agreed, and we set about investigating Morty's connections to Sofia and the offshore accounts listed in the document. It was a dangerous undertaking. Morty was a powerful man, and we knew that he wouldn't hesitate to use his influence to silence us if we threatened him. We had to be careful, to avoid arousing his suspicion, and to protect ourselves from retaliation. We started by examining Morty's financial disclosures, looking for any inconsistencies or red flags. We also talked to people who knew him, asking questions about his relationship with Sofia and his involvement in local business deals. As we dug deeper, we began to uncover a pattern of suspicious behavior. Morty had a history of accepting lavish gifts and donations from wealthy developers and business owners, and he had repeatedly voted in favor of projects that benefited his donors, even when those projects were opposed by local residents. We also discovered that Morty had a close personal relationship with Sofia Bellini, and that he had frequently used his influence to help her business. He had lobbied the city council to approve permits for her boutique, and he had intervened on her behalf when she had faced regulatory challenges. The evidence was mounting, but we still needed concrete proof of Morty's involvement in Sofia's money laundering scheme. We needed to find a direct link between him and the offshore accounts listed in the anonymous document. Giovanni suggested that we hire a forensic accountant to trace the flow of money through the network of accounts. It was an expensive proposition, but we knew that it was the only way to get the evidence we needed. We contacted a reputable accounting firm in Milan and explained our situation. The firm agreed to take on the case, but they warned us that it would be a long and difficult process. The accountant assigned to our case, a sharp and meticulous woman named Francesca, spent weeks poring over financial records, tracing transactions, and unraveling the complex web of offshore accounts. As she worked, she began to uncover a clear pattern of money laundering. Sofia Bellini was using her boutique to funnel illicit funds through a network of shell corporations and offshore accounts, and Morty was helping her to conceal the operation. Francesca discovered that Morty had received millions of euros in kickbacks from Sofia in exchange for his protection and his assistance in facilitating her illegal activities. She also found evidence that Morty had used his position to steer city contracts to companies controlled by Sofia and her associates, enriching himself and his cronies at the expense of the city's taxpayers. With Francesca's findings in hand, we had the evidence we needed to expose Morty's corruption. We decided to take our information to Inspector Rossi at the Guardia di Finanza, the same officer who had investigated Sofia Bellini. We trusted Rossi, and we knew that he would do everything in his power to bring Morty to justice. We met with Rossi in secret and presented him with Francesca's report and all the other evidence we had gathered. Rossi was stunned by what he saw. He couldn't believe that Morty, a respected and influential politician, was involved in such blatant corruption. He thanked us for bringing the information to him, and he promised to launch a full investigation. The investigation into Morty's corruption began immediately, and within days, the news broke in the media. The public was outraged. They couldn't believe that their elected officials were betraying their trust and enriching themselves at their expense. Morty denied the allegations, claiming that he was the victim of a political smear campaign. But the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was soon forced to resign from the city council. He was arrested and charged with bribery, corruption, and money laundering. As the investigation unfolded, more and more details of Morty's corruption came to light. It was revealed that he had been involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including accepting bribes from developers, rigging bids for city contracts, and embezzling public funds. The investigation also uncovered a network of corrupt officials and business owners who had been working with Morty to exploit the city for their own gain. The entire city government was thrown into chaos. Several other officials were forced to resign, and the city council was dissolved. A special election was called to elect a new government. As for me, I was once again hailed as a hero. The media praised me for my courage and my determination to expose corruption. I received countless messages of support from people all over Florence, thanking me for standing up for what was right. But amidst all the accolades and attention, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that someone was still out there, plotting against me. I had made powerful enemies, and I knew that they wouldn't rest until they had silenced me. One evening, as I was driving my taxi through the streets of Florence, I noticed a car following me. It was a black sedan with tinted windows, and it had been tailing me for several blocks. I tried to shake it off, but it stayed right behind me, its headlights glaring in my rearview mirror. I started to panic. I knew that whoever was in that car meant me harm. I stepped on the gas, trying to outrun them, but they were faster than me. They pulled up alongside my taxi and started firing shots at me. The bullets shattered my windows and pierced my tires. I lost control of the taxi and crashed into a lamppost. I was trapped inside the wreckage, bleeding and in shock. The black sedan screeched to a halt, and two men got out, their faces hidden behind masks. They approached my taxi and pointed their guns at me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then, suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the men screamed and fell to the ground. I opened my eyes and saw Inspector Rossi standing behind them, his gun smoking. He had saved my life. Rossi had been watching me, protecting me, ever since I had exposed Morty's corruption. He knew that I was in danger, and he had been determined to keep me safe. I was overcome with gratitude. I had been so focused on revenge that I had forgotten about the importance of justice and the value of human life. Rossi had reminded me that there were still good people in the world, people who were willing to risk their lives to protect others. As I recovered from my injuries, I realized that I had finally found the peace and closure that I had been seeking. I had brought justice to Sofia Bellini and Alessandro Morti, and I had helped to clean up the corruption in my city. I had also learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of revenge and the importance of forgiveness. I decided to leave my life as a taxi driver and to dedicate my life to fighting corruption and promoting justice. I joined a nonprofit organization that worked to expose wrongdoing and hold corrupt officials accountable. I traveled around Italy, speaking at conferences and workshops, sharing my story and inspiring others to take action. I also wrote a book about my experiences, which became a bestseller and was translated into several languages. My life had been turned upside down by Marco's betrayal, but I had emerged from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever. I had found my purpose in life, and I was determined to make a difference in the world. I had a newfound sense of purpose, fueled by a desire to protect others from the pain and betrayal I had experienced. Years passed. Sofia Bellini and Alessandro Morti were both convicted and sentenced to long prison terms. The city of Florence began to heal, slowly rebuilding its trust in government and its faith in the future. I found fulfillment in my work, traveling the country, speaking out against corruption, and empowering others to do the same. I even started a foundation to support investigative journalism and promote government transparency. But even as I found success and purpose, a part of me still felt restless. The threat to my life had made me realize how fragile life could be, and I longed for something more, something deeper. One day, while attending a conference in Rome, I met a man named Lorenzo. He was an architect, passionate about preserving Italy's historical landmarks. We struck up a conversation, and I was immediately drawn to his warmth, his intelligence, and his genuine kindness. He was different from Marco, different from any man I had ever met. He wasn't ambitious or driven by money or power. He was simply a good man with a good heart. We started dating, and soon I found myself falling in love again. Lorenzo was patient and understanding, and he helped me to heal from the wounds of my past. He showed me that it was possible to trust again, to love again, and to build a new life filled with happiness and joy. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony in the Tuscan countryside. It was the happiest day of my life. I had finally found my soulmate, and I was ready to embark on a new chapter of my life. We moved to a small village in the Chianti region, where Lorenzo was working on a project to restore an ancient villa. I continued my work with the foundation, but I also found time to enjoy the simple pleasures of life: cooking, gardening, and spending time with my husband. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to my herb garden, I received a letter. It was postmarked from Florence, and the return address was a name I hadn't seen in years: Marco. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the letter. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Marco's familiar scrawl. "Isabella," it read, "I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to reach out and apologize again for what I did to you. I've spent the last few years in prison, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on my mistakes. I realize now how much I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I'm getting out of prison soon, and I'm planning to start a new life. I'm not sure what the future holds for me, but I hope that one day I can earn your respect again. Sincerely, Marco." I stared at the letter, my mind racing. I had forgiven Marco years ago, but seeing his words on paper brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. I thought about the man I had once loved, the man who had betrayed me, and the man who was now seeking redemption. A wave of compassion washed over me. I knew that Marco had made terrible mistakes, but I also believed that everyone deserved a second chance. I decided to write him back. I told him that I had forgiven him long ago, and that I wished him well in his new life. I also encouraged him to use his experiences to help others, to warn them about the dangers of greed and ambition. I sealed the letter and mailed it the next day. As I walked away from the mailbox, I felt a sense of closure, a sense that I had finally put the past behind me once and for all. I was ready to move forward, to embrace my future with Lorenz, and to continue my work fighting for justice and equality. My journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain, betrayal, and loss. But it had also been a journey of growth, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. I had learned that revenge was a destructive force, that forgiveness was the key to healing, and that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope for a brighter future. As I looked out at the rolling hills of the Chianti region, bathed in the warm glow of the Tuscan sun, I knew that I was finally home. I was Isabella Rossi, a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who had found peace and happiness in the most unexpected of places. My story was a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even after the most devastating betrayals, it was possible to rebuild, to love, and to create a life of meaning and purpose. And as I breathed in the scent of the Tuscan countryside, I knew that my story was far from over. The world was full of injustice and corruption, and there was still much work to be done. But I was ready. I was armed with the lessons of my past, the love of my husband, and the unwavering belief that one person could make a difference. My name is Isabella Rossi, and I am ready to continue my fight for a better world, one story at a time. And so, my life in the Chianti region settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lorenzo and I spent our days restoring the ancient villa, transforming it into a beautiful and welcoming home. I continued my work with the foundation, traveling and speaking out against corruption. I found solace in the rolling hills, the vineyards, and the olive groves that surrounded us. But even in this idyllic setting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I longed for a child, a family of my own. Lorenzo and I had discussed it, of course. He was eager to start a family, but after everything I had been through, I was hesitant. I was afraid of bringing a child into a world filled with so much pain and suffering. I was afraid of not being a good mother, of repeating the mistakes of my past. One evening, as we were sitting on the terrace watching the sunset, I finally opened up to Lorenzo about my fears. He listened patiently, holding my hand and offering words of comfort and reassurance. "Isabella," he said, "I understand your fears, but you are a strong and compassionate woman. You have so much love to give. I know that you would be a wonderful mother." His words touched my heart, and I realized that I was ready. I was ready to take the leap of faith and start a family with the man I loved. We started trying to conceive, and after a few months, I was overjoyed to discover that I was pregnant. The news filled our lives with joy and anticipation. We started preparing for the arrival of our baby, decorating the nursery, buying clothes, and reading books about parenting. As my pregnancy progressed, I felt a growing sense of peace and contentment. I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, surrounded by love and happiness. But even in this blissful state, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. It was as if a dark cloud was hanging over my head, threatening to shatter my newfound happiness. One morning, I woke up with a sharp pain in my abdomen. I tried to ignore it, but the pain grew worse, and I started to bleed. Lorenzo rushed me to the hospital, where the doctors confirmed my worst fears. I was having a miscarriage. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I was devastated, heartbroken, and filled with a deep sense of despair. I had lost my baby, my dream of becoming a mother, and my hope for a brighter future. Lorenzo was equally devastated, but he remained strong and supportive. He held me in his arms and wept with me, offering words of comfort and love. As I grieved the loss of my baby, I started to question everything I had ever believed in. I wondered if I was being punished for my past, if I was destined to live a life of pain and suffering. I thought about Marco, about Sophia, about all the people I had hurt and all the people who had hurt me. I wondered if I would ever find true happiness, if I would ever be able to escape the shadows of my past. In the weeks that followed, I withdrew from the world, isolating myself from my friends and family. I stopped working, stopped gardening, stopped doing everything that had once brought me joy. I spent my days wandering aimlessly through the villa, lost in my thoughts and consumed by my grief. Lorenzo tried everything he could to help me, but nothing seemed to work. He took me on walks in the countryside, cooked my favorite meals, and read me poetry, but I remained trapped in my own world of pain. One evening, as we were sitting in silence on the terrace, I turned to Lorenzo and said, "I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I can live like this." He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean," I said, "that I'm not sure I'm strong enough to go on. I've lost so much, and I don't know if I can handle any more pain." Lorenzo took my hand and held it tightly. "Isabella," he said, "you are the strongest person I know. You have been through so much, and you have always found a way to overcome your challenges. I know that you can get through this too. But I don't want to be strong anymore," I said. "I'm tired of fighting. I just want to be happy." "And you will be happy," Lorenzo said. "But you have to give yourself time to heal. You have to allow yourself to grieve, and you have to remember that you are not alone. I am here for you, and I will always be here for you." His words touched my heart, and I realized that he was right. I couldn't give up. I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for Lorenzo, for my friends and family, and for all the people who were counting on me. I decided to seek professional help. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in grief and trauma. She helped me to process my emotions, to understand my fears, and to develop coping mechanisms for dealing with my pain. As I worked through my grief, I began to realize that I wasn't alone in my suffering. Many women had experienced miscarriages, and many people had lost loved ones. I found comfort in sharing my story with others and in hearing their stories. I also started to reconnect with my friends and family. I spent more time with my mother and father, who had always been a source of strength and support. I went out to dinner with my friends, laughed and danced, and remembered what it felt like to be happy. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. I started to work again, to garden again, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. I realized that I couldn't let my past define me. I had to move forward to create a new future for myself, a future filled with love, hope, and happiness. One day, as I was walking through the vineyards, I stumbled upon a small, abandoned chapel. It was overgrown with weeds and vines, and the roof was partially collapsed. But as I looked at it, I saw its potential. I imagined it restored to its former glory, a place of peace and reflection for the community. I decided to take on the project of restoring the chapel. It was a daunting task, but I knew that it would be a meaningful way to honor the memory of my baby and to give back to the community that had supported me through my grief. I enlisted the help of Lorenzo and a team of local artisans. We worked tirelessly, day after day, clearing away the weeds, repairing the roof, and restoring the interior of the chapel. As we worked, I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment. I was creating something beautiful out of something broken, and I was helping to bring hope and healing to the community. After several months of hard work, the chapel was finally restored. We held a grand opening ceremony, inviting the entire village to celebrate with us. The chapel was filled with music, laughter, and joy. As I stood there, surrounded by my friends and family, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I had overcome my grief, I had found my purpose, and I had created a new life filled with love and happiness. But the peace was about to be shattered. A mysterious note arrived, delivered by a nervous young man who claimed he'd been paid to simply hand it to me. It read, "They know about the chapel. They're coming." Who were they, and what did they want with the chapel? The note plunged me back into a world of fear and uncertainty, threatening to unravel the life I had so carefully rebuilt. The cryptic note haunted my waking hours. "They know about the chapel. They're coming." The words echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile sense of security I had cultivated. I confided in Lorenzo, who, despite his gentle nature, possessed a core of unwavering resolve. He examined the note, his brow furrowed in concern. "This is troubling, Isabella." Who could be behind this? We considered every possibility, every enemy from my past. Could it be someone connected to Sofia Bellini, seeking revenge from beyond prison walls? Or perhaps a remnant of Morty's corrupt network, resurfacing to reclaim their lost power? The possibilities were endless, each more terrifying than the last. We decided to contact Inspector Rossi, the man who had saved my life and helped me bring down Morty. He listened to my story with grave attention, his eyes narrowed in thought. "This could be serious, Isabella. The fact that they know about the chapel suggests they've been watching you for some time." He promised to launch an investigation, but cautioned me to be vigilant. "In the meantime, take precautions. Don't go anywhere alone, and be sure to lock your doors and windows." Lorenzo and I heeded Rossi's advice, transforming our peaceful villa into a fortress. We installed security cameras, reinforced the doors and windows, and even purchased a guard dog, a fierce Mermano named Stella. The dog was protective and loving. The atmosphere in our home became tense, the joy and laughter replaced by suspicion and fear. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering who was watching me, who was planning to harm me. The chapel, which had been a symbol of hope and healing, now felt like a target, a beacon drawing danger to our doorstep. I considered closing it, shutting it down to protect myself and my loved ones. But I knew that would be giving in to fear, allowing my enemies to control my life. I refused to let that happen. Instead, I resolved to defend the chapel, to protect the community that had embraced it, and to uncover the truth behind the mysterious threat. Lorenzo and I began to investigate on our own, questioning the villagers, searching for any clues that might lead us to our enemies. We learned that a group of wealthy developers had been eyeing the land around the chapel for years, hoping to build a luxury resort. The villagers had fiercely resisted the development, fearing it would destroy the character of their community and disrupt their way of life. Could these developers be behind the threat? Were they trying to scare us into abandoning the chapel so they could proceed with their plans? We decided to pay a visit to the leader of the developers, a ruthless businessman named Vittorio Mancini. Mancini was a notorious figure in the region, known for his aggressive tactics and his disregard for the law. He greeted us with a smug smile, his eyes cold and calculating. "Isabella Rossi," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I've heard a lot about you, the crusader against corruption, the champion of the people." "Vittorio," I replied, my voice steady, "I know you want to build a resort on the land around the chapel, and I know that you're willing to do whatever it takes to get what you want." Mancini laughed. "You have no proof of that," he said, "but let's just say that I wouldn't be sorry to see that old chapel disappear. It's an eyesore, a relic of the past. It's standing in the way of progress." "If you try to harm the chapel," I said, "I will expose you, I will reveal your corrupt dealings to the world, and I will make sure that you never build your resort." Mancini's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure hatred. "You're playing a dangerous game, Isabella," he said. "You should be careful who you cross." We left Mancini's office feeling shaken but determined. It was clear that he was involved in the threat against the chapel, but we still needed proof, something that would convince the authorities to take action. We decided to enlist the help of an old friend, a tech-savvy hacker named Giorgio. Giorgio had helped me in the past, uncovering valuable information that had led to the downfall of Morty. He was a master of digital espionage, able to penetrate even the most secure computer systems. I told Giorgio about our suspicions regarding Mancini and asked him to investigate his company's computer network. Giorgio agreed, and within a few days, he had uncovered a trove of incriminating evidence. He found emails, documents, and financial records that proved Mancini was involved in a conspiracy to sabotage the chapel and intimidate the villagers. He had hired thugs to vandalize the chapel, spread rumors about its safety, and threaten anyone who dared to support it. With Giorgio's evidence in hand, We went back to Inspector Rossi. This time, he had enough to take action. He obtained a warrant to search Mancini's office and home. The search turned up even more evidence, confirming Mancini's involvement in the conspiracy. Mancini and several of his associates were arrested and charged with a variety of crimes, including conspiracy, intimidation, and vandalism. With Mancini behind bars, the threat against the chapel seemed to dissipate. The villagers breathed a sigh of relief, and the community began to heal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. It was as if Mancini was just a pawn in a larger game, a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. I couldn't understand why he was so desperate to build a resort on that particular piece of land. It was a beautiful location, but there were other equally attractive sites in the area. What was so special about the land around the chapel? I decided to do some research into the history of the area, hoping to uncover some clue that might explain Mancini's obsession. I spent hours poring over old maps, historical documents, and local folklore. As I delved deeper into the past, I began to uncover a hidden history, a secret that had been buried for centuries. I learned that the land around the chapel had once been the site of an ancient Roman temple dedicated to a goddess of fertility and healing. The temple had been destroyed by early Christians, who had built the chapel on top of its ruins as a symbol of their triumph over paganism. But according to local legend, the temple had been built on a site of immense power, a place where the earth's energy flowed freely. The legend claimed that the land possessed healing properties, and that anyone who spent time there would be blessed with good health and fertility. Could this be the reason why Mancini was so desperate to build a resort on the land? Was he aware of the legend, and was he hoping to exploit the land's healing properties for his own gain? The thought sent a chill down my spine. It was becoming clear that there was more to this story than I had ever imagined, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. I began to investigate the legend of the Roman temple, seeking out experts in ancient history and mythology. I traveled to Rome, where I visited the ruins of other Roman temples, studying their architecture and their symbolism. As I delved deeper into the ancient world, I began to understand the significance of the temple's location. It was situated on a ley line, a straight line connecting ancient sites of power. Ley lines were believed to be conduits of energy, carrying spiritual and magical forces across the earth. The temple had been built on this ley line to harness its power, to amplify its healing properties. It was also said that the temple was located on a portal, a gateway to another dimension. The portal was believed to be guarded by ancient spirits, who protected the land from those who sought to exploit its power for evil purposes. I realized that Mancini wasn't just interested in building a resort. He was after something much more valuable, the power of the land. He wanted to harness the energy of the ley line, to tap into the portal, and to use its magic for his own selfish ends. But I knew that if he succeeded, it could have devastating consequences. The land's power could be corrupted, used to create chaos and destruction. I had to stop him, no matter what it took. But I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed help, someone who understood the ancient world, someone who could guide me through the mysteries of the temple and the ley line. And then I remembered an old friend, a scholar of ancient religions named Professor Armelini. Armelini was a brilliant and eccentric man, a walking encyclopedia of ancient lore. He had spent his life studying the mysteries of the past, and he possessed a wealth of knowledge that was unmatched by anyone I knew. I contacted Armelini and told him about my discoveries. He was fascinated by the story and immediately agreed to help me. "This is an extraordinary opportunity, Isabella," he said. "We must protect this ancient site from those who would seek to exploit its power." Armelini flew to Florence, and together we began to yeri the land around the chapel. He showed me how to locate the ley line, how to detect the presence of the ancient spirits, and how to harness the power of the land for good. He also warned me about the dangers of the portal, telling me that it could be easily corrupted by those with evil intentions. As we explored the land, we discovered a hidden chamber beneath the chapel, a secret room that had been sealed off for centuries. Inside the chamber, we found a collection of ancient artifacts, including statues, inscriptions, and ritual objects. Armelini identified the artifacts as belonging to the cult of the goddess who had been worshipped at the Roman temple. He explained that the cult had practiced a form of magic that was based on the harmony between humans and nature. The members of the cult had believed that by connecting with the Earth's energy, they could heal themselves and others and create a world of peace and prosperity. We realized that Mancini was planning to desecrate the chamber, to steal the artifacts, and to use them to harness the land's power for his own evil purposes. We had to stop him before it was too late. Armelini devised a plan to protect the chamber and the land's power. He explained that we needed to perform an ancient ritual, a ceremony that would seal off the portal and protect the ley line from corruption. The ritual required a specific set of ingredients, including herbs, crystals, and sacred objects. We spent days gathering the ingredients, following Armelini's instructions to the letter. As we prepared for the ritual, I felt a growing sense of unease. I knew that we were about to confront forces that were beyond our understanding. And I feared that we might not be strong enough to succeed. The night of the ritual arrived. The moon was full, casting a silvery glow over the Tuscan landscape. Lorenzo, Armelini, and I gathered in the hidden chamber beneath the chapel. We lit candles, burned incense, and began to chant the ancient words of the ritual. As we chanted, I felt a surge of energy flowing through me, connecting me to the land, to the ancient spirits, and to the goddess who had once been worshipped in this place. The air in the chamber grew thick with power. The candles flickered, the incense swirled, and the ancient artifacts began to glow. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The walls of the chamber trembled, and a blinding light erupted from the center of the room. We had opened the portal. But it wasn't the peaceful, harmonious portal that the ancient cult had described. This portal was dark and chaotic, filled with malevolent energy. From the depths of the portal, shadowy figures began to emerge. They were grotesque and terrifying, their eyes burning with hatred. The ancient spirits had been corrupted. Mancini had already begun to taint the land's power, and now the portal was unleashing its fury upon us. We were in grave danger. We had to close the portal before it was too late. But how? Armelini cried out, his voice trembling with fear. We must complete the ritual. We must seal off the portal before it consumes us all. We continued to chant, our voices rising above the din of the chaos. We poured the sacred herbs onto the ground, placed the crystals around the chamber, and held the sacred objects aloft. The energy in the chamber intensified. The light grew brighter, the shadows grew darker, and the battle between good and evil raged around us. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I looked down and saw a shadowy figure standing before me, its hand raised, its fingers dripping with dark energy. It was Mancini. He had found a way to enter the chamber, to interrupt our ritual, and to claim the portal for himself. "You can't stop me, Isabella," he snarled. "I will harness the power of this land, and I will rule the world." He lunged at me, his hand outstretched, ready to strike. But before he could reach me, Lorenzo stepped in front of me, shielding me from the attack. The shadowy figure struck Lorenzo, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. "Lorenzo!" I cried out. I rushed to his side, cradling him in my arms. He was pale and lifeless, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. My heart filled with despair. I had lost him. The darkness had claimed him. But then I remembered the power of the land, the healing energy that flowed through the ley line. I placed my hands on Lorenzo's chest and closed my eyes. I focused my mind, channeling all my energy into him, willing him to live. I chanted the words of the ancient ritual, calling upon the goddess to heal him. And then miracle happened. Lorenzo gasped, his eyes fluttered open, and he took a deep breath. He was alive. I had saved him. The power of the land had healed him, but the battle was far from over. Mancini was still standing before us, his eyes burning with hatred. He was determined to claim the portal, to seize the power of the land for himself. I knew that I had to stop him, no matter the cost. I stood up, my eyes blazing with determination. "This ends now, Vittorio," I said. "You will not desecrate this land. You will not corrupt this power." Mancini laughed. "You can't defeat me, Isabella," he said. "I am stronger than you can ever imagine." He unleashed a wave of dark energy, sending it hurtling towards me. I braced myself for the impact, but then something extraordinary happened. The ancient artifacts in the chamber began to glow with a blinding light. The statues of the goddess came to life, their eyes flashing with power. And a chorus of voices echoed through the chamber, chanting words of protection and healing. The goddess had answered my call. She had sent her spirits to defend the land and to vanquish the evil that threatened it. The shadowy figures turned on Mancini, their eyes burning with righteous fury. They swarmed him, tearing at his flesh, ripping him apart. Mancini screamed in agony, his body writhing in pain. And then, with a final, agonizing cry, he was gone. The portal closed. The shadows vanished. And the chamber was filled with a warm, golden light. The goddess had triumphed. The land was safe, and I had finally found peace. In the aftermath of the battle, we sealed off the hidden chamber beneath the chapel, protecting it from those who might seek to exploit its power in the future. We also worked to restore the chapel to its former glory, making it a place of peace and healing for the entire community. Lorenzo made a full recovery, and our love grew stronger than ever. We continued to live in our peaceful villa in the Chianti region, surrounded by our friends and family. And as for me, I continued my work fighting for justice and equality, knowing that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope for a brighter future. Years later, as I sat on the terrace, watching the sunset with Lorenzo by my side, I thought about everything that had happened, all the challenges I had faced, all the battles I had fought. And I realized that my journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new battles, and new opportunities to make a difference in the world. But I was ready. I was armed with the lessons of my past, the love of my husband, and the unwavering belief that one person could make a difference. And as I breathed in the scent of the Tuscan countryside, I knew that my story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, a new adventure, a new quest to create a better world for all. A new mystery emerged. An old map surfaced, hinting at a hidden network of ley lines beneath Italy, suggesting the chapel was merely one node in a much larger, more significant web. The map whispered of a power that could reshape the world, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was destined to either protect it or watch it fall into the wrong hands. Isabella Rossi, at 35, had carved out a serene life in the rolling hills of the Chianti region, a place where the sun sank low over the vineyards, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. After her tumultuous past riddled with betrayal and danger, every day felt like a precious gift. She busied herself restoring the ancient chapel beside her villa, transforming it into a sanctuary for the community. She reveled in the laughter of children playing nearby, the warmth of Lorenzo's hand in hers, and the promise of tomorrow. Yet, darkness loomed just out of sight. The arrival of the map signaled a rift in her peaceful existence, revealing the hidden ley lines that crisscrossed beneath Italy, hinting at an ancient power that could change everything. The whispered legends echoed in her mind, and with them came a sense of dread. Who would seek this power, and what lengths would they go to obtain it? She felt a chill run down her spine. While Isabella had fought to protect the chapel from the likes of Vittorio Mancini, she was not naive to the threats that still lingered. The allure of ancient energy could attract nefarious individuals, eager to exploit it, leading her to wonder if her past encounters were truly behind her. It seemed as if fate was pulling her back into turmoil when whispers of revolution began circulating among the locals. Their discontent had grown from the ashes of corruption. A shadowy figure was said to be gathering forces, determined to reclaim the land around the chapel for their own greed. Little did Isabella know, this figure was all too familiar and would bring her face to face with the darkness she sought to escape. As Isabella clutched the map tightly in her hands, she knew that she had a choice to make. Will she fight once more for her home and her community, or will she grapple with the past, risking everything she has rebuilt? In the days that followed, Isabella approached her community, gathering them in the chapel for a meeting under the dim, flickering candlelight. The atmosphere hummed with apprehension. Everyone was aware of the undercurrent of unrest. Their faces reflected a tapestry of emotions: fear, hope, and resilience. "We have learned that outsiders are trying to seize our land again," she began, her voice steady, yet imbued with an urgency. "I have discovered an ancient map promising untold power beneath our feet. We cannot let this power fall into the wrong hands." The crowd buzzed with chatter, the fear cascading into anger. Isabella could see the fire igniting in their hearts. Old grievances emerged, voices raised against the luxury resort that once threatened the chapel. The memory of Mancini's audacity fueled their collective rage. Inspired by Isabella's determination, they rallied around her. "We must come together. We are stronger united than alone," she urged. "We will protect this sacred ground, ensure that its peace remains undisturbed. But first, we need to discover who is behind this threat." Brought together by a shared purpose, they formed committees to gather information, share resources, and formulate plans to defend their home. However, even as hope surged among them, Isabella felt a biting fear in her gut. Would they be strong enough to fend off whatever lay ahead? The sun set on their meeting, casting long shadows of uncertainty. The very next day, Isabella decided it was time to investigate the map's origins. Alone in the chapel, she meticulously studied the parchment's details. The ink danced with intricate markings that hinted at gateways, ley lines, and other sacred sites. But she couldn't decipher its secrets alone. She needed the insight of Professor Armelini. The professor had been a guiding light in her unexpected journey through ancient lore, and he would certainly shed light on this new find. She called him and invited him to the chapel, her heart racing with anticipation as she awaited his arrival. When Armelini arrived, she quickly laid out the map on the chapel's altar. "It's magnificent," he exclaimed, leaning closer to inspect the delicate lines and angles. "This could lead us to the power source between these ley lines, but we must proceed with caution." Armelini studied the annotations and traced a line leading to a much larger section of land neighboring their community. That land had been vacant for years, covered in dense forest that the villagers had avoided for generations. "There may be secrets buried deeper than we suspect," he said quietly, a hint of unease in his voice. "If there are others after this power, they may not welcome our curiosity." With that warning in mind, Isabella's pulse quickened. As they plotted a course towards the ancient site depicted on the map, a sense of excitement mingled with trepidation filled her spirit. They could find allies hidden in the shadows, or maybe they would awaken sinister forces that were best left undisturbed. Could this journey prove to be the catalyst for the upheaval they feared? The following morning, Isabella and Armelini set out to explore the forest. The sun streamed through the foliage, casting dappled shadows that danced around their feet. Each step deeper into the woods heightened their senses. The sounds of the forest surrounded them, the rustle of leaves, birds calling, and the soft crunch of twigs beneath their feet. After a while, they stumbled upon a clearing marked by ancient stones arranged in a mystical formation, a circle surrounded by age-old oak trees. In that moment, Isabella felt a pulse through the ground beneath her feet, a vibration that resonated deep within. It was as if the earth itself was hungry for connection. "This must be it," Armelini breathed, reverently stepping into the circle. "The heart of the ley line." As they explored the area, Isabella observed that a thick haze flitted in and out among the stones, almost as though it were guarding its own secrets. They paused to examine the stones, their faces etched with carvings of symbols, goddesses entwined with vines, celestial arrows pointing in all directions, each stone a fragment of history that had been weathered through the ages. As they traced their fingers over the etchings, Isabella's heart raced. The connection between the chapel and this site was undeniable. But just as she began to align their findings in her mind, she noticed a flicker of movement in the trees behind them, a shadow that sent shivers down her spine. The feeling of being watched blossomed in her chest. They were not alone. For a brief moment, Isabella met Armelini's gaze. Their unspoken understanding on the line of danger ignited the air. Time seemed to freeze as the crackling tension loomed, and the threat hanging overhead made its presence known. Whoever was following them would soon reveal themselves. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere shattered as a group of rough-looking men emerged from the trees. They wore menacing scowls, their rugged clothes speaking of trouble and deceit. The leader stepped forward, his hardened expression matching the tension in Isabella's stomach. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and gravelly. "This place is off limits." Isabella's heart raced. She could feel her pulse throbbing in her ears. "We mean no harm," she stammered. "We came to study the ley lines to honor this sacred site." The man laughed, a cruel sound devoid of kindness. "Honor does not pay the bills, sweet lady. That power is ours." The threat slipped out like a wolf baring its teeth. "You'd best turn back before you regret it." Armelini stepped forward, his academic bravado surging. "You cannot take what does not belong to you. This site is part of history, and I will not let you tarnish it." Isabella held her breath. Tension crackled in the air. Would they truly attack, or would reason prevail? Just as she thought the confrontation might escalate, another voice called from behind the men, a familiar one she recognized all too well, sending icy dread through her veins. "Stand down!" Vittorio Mancini stepped forward, a predatory grin spreading across his face. His reputation preceded him, and the chilling memories of his previous threats lingered heavily. "You are several steps behind, Isabella. I have been waiting for this moment." He raised a hand, his men stepping back at his command as though he were a puppet master controlling marionettes. "We understand the ley lines better than you ever could, and soon you will help us possess their power." Isabella felt the pit of her stomach drop. They had unwittingly walked into Mancini's trap, and there wasn't an escape in sight. "What do you want?" she questioned, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. "Your chapel may have served a purpose, but I will turn it into something greater," Mancini sneered. "A resort built on the power of these ancient grounds, a place where my influence will only grow stronger." His vision swirled with greed and entitlement, and Isabella knew she had to act fast. The stakes had never been higher, not just for herself, but for the community she had fought so valiantly to protect. Could she find a way to outsmart Mancini and his thugs, or had they finally met their match? As the confrontation escalated, Isabella's mind raced for a way out. The forest felt heavy with tension, and she could feel the pulse of the ley lines beneath her feet urging her toward a solution. Mancini was a man driven by ambition and greed, able to manipulate the very energy that had once protected the land. With a sudden surge of courage, she spoke up. "You think you have power over this land? You think you can control what lies within it? You are wrong." The words flowed from her mouth like a river, gaining momentum with each breath. "The ley lines are not just about power. They are about respect and healing. You cannot possess them through greed." A flicker of doubt crossed Mancini's sharp features at her conviction. Perhaps he hadn't anticipated her defiance, but it didn't last long. "You are mistaken," he hissed, "and your faith in history will be your undoing." With a wave of his hand, his men surged forward. The tension snapped like a taut string, and Isabella braced herself for battle. Armelini called to her. "We have to retreat. I will create a diversion." In a remarkable display of ingenuity, he conjured a cloud of dust from the forest floor, obscuring their vision. "Follow my directions," she heard him shout through the chaos. But as Isabella darted away, pushing through the swirls of dust, one of Mancini's men caught her arm, turning her around. Panic surged through her, and she fought back, desperate to escape. "Let her go!" Armelini's voice filled the air with authority, but the struggle was fierce. Isabella knew that their escape depended on how quickly they could regroup and rethink their strategy. They had to be smarter than Mancini. They couldn't allow fear to dictate their fate. The path ahead would require every ounce of cunning she possessed. In what felt like a whirlwind of chaos, Isabella finally broke free and sprinted toward the trees, her lungs burning and her heart pounding in her chest. Armelini followed closely behind, his guiding presence amidst the turmoil an anchor of solid reassurance. As they pushed through the foliage, Isabella could hear Mancini's men crashing through the underbrush in pursuit, their angry shouts ricocheting through the clearing. "We must make it to the chapel," she yelled to Armelini, desperation fueling every word. "It's our only refuge." They emerged from the trees and spotted the outline of the chapel in the distance, its bright white walls glowing in contrast to the encroaching darkness. Adrenaline surged through Isabella as they sprinted toward it, but even as they reached the door, dread settled in her bones. Mancini would not be far behind. Once inside, she quickly barred the door, taking a moment to catch her breath as Armelini assessed the situation. "We need to fortify the chapel, protect it against Mancini's men," he said, his voice steady in the midst of uncertainty. "They will come. The ley line has awakened something in them." Isabella nodded, but there was more weight on her shoulders than just physical defense. She understood that this battle wasn't just for the chapel, it was for the very spirit of the land. They began to set up makeshift barricades, using the abundant supplies from the chapel to prepare for a confrontation. "If we can hold them off until nightfall," Isabella said, "we may be able to channel the power of the ley line against them." Armelini nodded, a fierce determination alight in his eyes. But as the minutes turned into hours, their respite grew untenable. Isabella could sense the impending storm, the dark energy that radiated from beyond the walls of the chapel. Would they muster the strength to endure the night, or would it all come crashing down? As evening settled over the landscape with a haunting chill, Isabella and Armelini stood guard at the chapel, the atmosphere thick with tension. The faint rustling of leaves outside indicated that Mancini's men were closing in, their footsteps becoming louder and more menacing. Isabella felt a stirring within her, the ley line's energy surging beneath the ground, calling out to her. "Whatever happens, we have to stay strong," she whispered to Armelini. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes meeting hers with fierce conviction. "We will protect this land, Isabella. Together, we will channel the energy and protect the sacred site. Darkness enveloped the chapel as they settled into a tense silence, hearts beating steadily with resolve. Suddenly, a loud thud resonated against the chapel door, sending splinters flying as Mancini's men began their assault. The two of them braced themselves, knowing that the moment of truth was fast approaching. "Steady yourself, Isabella," Armelini said, his voice steady. Isabella's heart raced as they prepared to face the coming storm. The first blow struck, sending vibrations through the ancient structure. The men shouted and banged against the door, their words laced with greed and anger, demanding their way inside. Isabella felt the ley line pulse fiercely beneath her feet, guiding her thoughts toward a plan. As the door splintered, she gritted her teeth, knowing this would be their defining moment. With her spirit ignited, she began to chant the ancient incantation passed down through generations, calling upon the energy around her. "We do not fear you. This is sacred ground." Armelini joined in, and together they wove the words of protection, each syllable reverberating through the air, intertwining with the raw energy beneath their feet. With each chant, the walls of the chapel glowed faintly, echoing the strength of their resolve. Would it be enough to stave off the darkness? As Mancini's men battered down the chapel door, a surge of power enveloped Isabella. "With the strength of the ley lines, we protect what is sacred," she shouted, feeling the energy surge through her body like a wildfire. The air crackled with magic as the essence of the land responded to her call, amplifying her voice into a force that reverberated against their tormentors. The men hesitated, confusion washing over their faces as they felt the palpable energy radiating from within. Isabella seized the moment, imbuing the very walls with her determination. "You are not welcome here," she roared, her voice a weapon forged from conviction. With a final powerful chant, the ley line erupted, emanating waves of protective energy that spilled forth as dazzling light. If Mancini thought he could unleash his threats upon them without consequence, he was sorely mistaken. The chapel became a beacon of resilience as darkness met its match. Isabella watched as the men recoiled, shock painted across their faces. It was then she felt the connection shatter, a crack in their resolve. The ley line surged, channeling its energy and forcing the men back, as if invisible hands reached out from the earth itself to protect their domain. In the chaos, Mancini stood rooted, eyes wide with disbelief. "What is happening?" he yelled, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The combined strength of the ley line and Isabella's unyielding spirit overwhelmed them, pushing the men back as the barrier of energy solidified around the chapel. They were forced to retreat, stumbling away, unable to withstand the force that emerged from the sacred site. "This is not over, Isabella," Mancini roared, fury dancing in his eyes, but the threat diminished as the light glimmered across the landscape, stirring spirits of the land to rise alongside her. Their utter defeat drove them into the night, the shadows swallowing their retreating forms. Armelini collapsed beside her, breathless from the exertion. "You did it, Isabella, you conquered them," he exclaimed, awe brimming in his voice. "Together we protected the chapel." Isabella fell to her knees, barely able to comprehend what had just occurred. Exhaustion washed over her, the warmth of victory mingling with the remnants of fear. They had succeeded, but the shadows of threat still loomed. "We earned the night, but it won't be the end of Mancini's ambitions," she said, her heart still racing. "As long as there is power, he will continue to seek it." In the weeks that followed, the tension in the community began to smooth, the threat of Mancini muted by their victory. The villagers praised Isabella and Armelini as heroes for protecting the sacred site, but within her heart lingered a sense of unrest. A lingering shadow nagged at her. Despite their triumph, she couldn't shake the thought that she hadn't truly vanquished the danger. Isabella remained vigilant, often returning to the ley line at dusk, feeling its pulse echo strongly in the ancient stones. Each visit allowed the stabilizing energy to comfort her, yet doubts lingered until the day an unexpected visitor appeared, a familiar figure cloaked in darkness. Countless questions weighed heavily on Isabella's heart. Had Mancini returned, or had someone else come to disturb the peace she had fought so hard to restore? The sense of foreboding heightened. The villagers had rallied around her, but were they truly safe? As the enigmatic figure drew nearer from the depths of the trees, Isabella felt the ley line pulse in response, as if reminding her of the connection she shared with the land. Would she find clarity in the chaos encroaching on her once peaceful life? As the figure emerged from the shadows, Isabella's heart raced with recognition despite the cloak that shrouded the person's identity. "Lorenz," she exclaimed, her heart leaping with both relief and confusion. "What are you doing here?" His face softened in the light, revealing the familiar warmth of his spirit. "I had to see you," he said. "I felt the energy from miles away. There's something powerful at work." He glanced nervously past her, his eyes flickering with concern. "The villagers are worried about Mancini. The legends say he's been gathering forces. If they know about the ley lines, if they know about the power." Isabella nodded solemnly, keenly aware of the weight resting on her shoulders. "I thought we had driven him back," she said, the tension creeping into her voice. "But there's a new danger unraveling, Lorenzo. We need to be prepared." Isabella led Lorenzo to the ancient stones, recounting what had unfolded since the confrontation with Mancini's men. As she explained, Lorenzo listened intently, nodding slowly. "We must use the ley lines to our advantage," he suggested. "If Mancini thinks he can threaten us into submission, we need to confront him again, this time with all we have." Energy surged through Isabella, rekindling the light of resolve in her heart. "You're right," she said, determination paving her path. "We have the strength of our community, and we have the ley lines." Together, they plotted a plan to fortify the chapel further, gather support from the villagers, and investigate Mancini's movements. They had to stay ahead of him, protect the chapel and the spirit of the land, and ensure the ancient power could not be manipulated. Meanwhile, Isabella began to notice strange occurrences near the ley line. The air crackled with a sense of unpredictability, and the earth itself felt restless. The villagers reported strange happenings, animals behaving erratically, crops wilting beyond reason, and eerie whispers echoing through the night. Rumors of an approaching storm began to circulate, but Isabella felt the impending danger beneath the surface. A storm not just of wind and rain, but one of corruption brewing like a toxin. It became clear that more was at stake than they had realized. They needed allies, and Isabella's intuition drew her toward the wisdom of those who had once worshipped at the temple. They gathered the villagers for an urgent meeting, Isabella urging them to come together and pool their resources as they invoked the ancient spirits of protection. Yet she knew that outside threats loomed large. Every whisper carried the potential for betrayal. Could the true strength of the ley lines ward off the new danger on the horizon, or would they have to confront Mancini head-on? As the fervent planning unfolded, Isabella delved deeper into research on ley lines, seeking any clue that might strengthen their resolve. She envisioned a meeting with the villagers mixed with the energy of the earth, turning knowledge into power. Perhaps through rituals they could harness the ley lines' energy, create protection that would bind the constraints of corruption. They gathered every full moon, invoking unity, resonating chants that echoed through the valleys. But on the eve of their most critical gathering, Isabella felt a ripple of foreboding. Would they attract the very forces they sought to protect themselves against? Just as Isabella poured her heart into the preparations, a flicker of unease clawed at the edges of her consciousness. With each passing day, the village readied for battle, while whispers of Mancini's return only deepened their resolve. Were they unwittingly walking straight into a trap? Knowing they could not back down, Isabella pressed on, bolstered by the unwavering support of the villagers. The moon blazed bright overhead, the power of the ley line strong beneath their feet. She stood in the center of the chapel alongside Armelini and Lorenz, heart racing as the villagers formed a circle around them. "We gather here to protect our home," Isabella called, her voice rising into the night air. "We summon the spirits of our ancestors to guide us, to lend us strength against the threats that come for our land." As their chants resonated beneath the stars, Isabella felt the familiar pulse of energy surge, merging with the ancestral power of the ley line. Spirit energy danced within the air as the villagers illuminated their intentions, drawing the very essence of those who once walked the path they now tread. But amidst the fervor of the gathering, Isabella could sense a shift. The energy around them darkened. The shadows grew thick, wrapping around their words, feeding into an unseen malevolence. Panic coursed through her veins, and she exchanged worried glances with Lorenzo. The ley line had warned her of change, and she braced herself, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. As the final chant echoed in harmony through the hall, arms raised high in a circle, Mancini appeared at the threshold, a dark grin stretched across his face. The shadows that clung to him pulsated with energy, dark and thick like storm clouds gathering above. "What a lovely little gathering," he sneered, stepping into the chapel, his presence chilling the air. Isabella felt the ley lines twitch beneath her feet, a desperate plea for protection. "You think your little rituals can keep me away?" Mancini taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're playing a dangerous game." Isabella gathered her courage, driving the fear down deep in her heart. This was the moment to stand united. "You will not claim what does not belong to you," she declared, her voice raw with conviction. "This land is not yours to take." The villagers moved with her, creating a barrier of unity, hearts aligned as they embraced the ley line's energy. "Leave now or face the wrath of the land." With that, the ground trembled, the energy beginning to swirl like a tempest, channeling their strength into the confrontation. Mancini's eyes narrowed, and he summoned his men, who surged forward with a renewed ferocity. It was chaos, a whirlwind of shadows clashing against the raw, radiant light from the ley lines as it erupted from Isabella and the villagers. Isabella felt the energy build as the ley lines awakened fiercely in response. "Protect each other," she shouted, rallying those by her side as the shadows twisted and plunged toward them. A powerful wave surged through the chapel, the forces of light and darkness clashing violently, creating a spectacle that shook the earth. But amidst the struggle, Isabella felt despair claw at her throat. Would the darkness of Mancini's ambitions swallow them whole? Just as the tide appeared to shift against her, she felt a connection with the ancient spirits of the land deepen, igniting a flame of hope. With renewed determination, she summoned every ounce of courage remaining inside her, knowing she had one final chance to seize the moment. With the air crackling around her, Isabella threw her hands open wide, summoning the ley line's energy with an incantation that resonated from her very soul. "Ancient spirits of the earth, hear my call. We defend this sacred ground. Rise as one to protect this place from dark ambition." The cacophony of energy surged through the sanctuary, erupting into a spectacle of brilliant light as the spirits materialized around her like echoes of history. The shadows twisted and writhed against the light, feeling the very essence of what they were up against. For even though the darkness clung stubbornly, the renewed energy forged a barrier, pushing Mancini and his men back. A whirlwind of brilliance enveloped the chapel, spotlighting Isabella at its center. The light grew stronger, cascading around her as if the land itself responded to her innate strength. In that electrifying moment, she understood what it meant to have the power of the ley lines coursing through her veins. Isabella felt alive. Shouting her defiance, she joined the energy flowing through the space, intertwining it with the villagers' resolve. Maneuvering shadows collided against the anchor of light like waves crashing upon the shore. They would not falter or back down. Each of Mancini's men reeled back, shadows drawn into the blinding brilliance as if the spirits of the land were reclaiming their territory. In the showdown, Isabella pushed forward, her feet buoyed by the knowledge and courage of the land. "This place belongs to us, to every soul who cherishes its history," she declared, channeling every ounce of herself into her words. The ley lines pulsed and surged, forcing the shadows into retreat. With one final push of energy flowing through her spirit, they conjoined, creating an explosion of light that shattered the darkness once and for all. As the boundaries between shadow and light blurred, the temple's spirits surged forth to reclaim their haven, and Mancini and his men found themselves swept away into the very void they had sought to manipulate. The aftermath enveloped the chapel in a hushed hush as quiet descended. Mancini's men faded into nothingness, leaving behind only swirling remnants of darkness. The ley lines pulsed like a heartbeat, reverberating with a triumphant spirit. The villagers stood breathless, astonished at the power of their unity. Isabella, heart racing, looked up at her friends. "It is done," she whispered. The chapel now glowed, its walls echoing with ancient energy, fractured shadows dissipating in the air. They had pushed back the darkness, but the battle had taken its toll on everyone inside. The weight of what had transpired settled in, each of them imbued with the memory of their victory and of the lingering dangers that would always lurk beyond the horizon. Isabella turned to Lorenzo, his face glowing with pride and relief. "We did it together," she exhaled, laughter shimmering with disbelief. "Against all odds, we rose to protect what we love." They embraced, a promise of strength lingering in every breath. To protect one another, to protect the land, those pledges would resonate throughout their lives. Even together, however, uncertainty still brewed in the depths of her mind. The ley lines had whispered secrets, a lingering power remained just beneath the surface. While they emerged victorious against Mancini's threat, would resilience be enough to protect their sanctuary against the shadows awaiting in the depths of the unknown? But stepping away from the heavy evening only ignited a spark for hopes anew. The chapel stood undiminished, exuding warmth and strength, embracing the connections of those who fought to protect it. Every villager's heart pulsed in rhythm with the ley line, solidifying their bond in the face of adversity. With renewed resolve, they promised to preserve what had been rebuilt. The generations who worshipped here remained etched in time, spirits entwined as guardians over the sacred land. And just as they rejoiced in their unity and triumph, Isabella understood that her journey of rediscovery and protection was only just beginning. The whispers of hidden truths still danced in the air, and guiding the power of the ley lines would remain her call to destiny. Would these renewed connections lead her down further paths of hidden truths and unexpected discoveries?